In Abel Ferrara's 1992 cult classic Bad Lieutenant, Harvey Keitel plays the lieutenant. He's a New York cop who succumbs to drug addiction, gambling, and goes completely off the reservation. On the one hand, turning into a vigilante, on the other, embracing corruption in an epic kind of way to the point where he implodes in a fervor of self destruction. There's a scene in this classic film where the lieutenant, after he completely throws in the towel on any sense of his official duties or propriety, wanders into a convenience store and witnesses a crime in progress. And as the robbers are going about robbing the store owner, the lieutenant goes nuts and beats the criminals almost to death. And as a viewer, we experience a mixture of shock and satisfaction. Shock at the raw brutality of this character going crazy, and at the same time, immense satisfaction that these criminal elements are getting their just dessert in real time. No trial, no lawyers, no due process. We witness the crime, we witness its brutal retribution, and there's an eye for an eye sense of satisfaction, even transcendent justice. I feel as though our current political climate is fueled by millions of Americans analogously taking satisfaction in a scene similar to The Bad Lieutenant. And I feel the need to chat about that, if only for a few minutes today. Hello, and welcome to the Bald and Bloviating Podcast. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz, and I'd like to bloviate a little bit about the importance of due process, a system of checks and balances in the current state of our culture, our politics, and our government. Bukele, El Presidente of El Salvador, and Donald Trump are buddies. They are fist pumping in the Oval Office. Bukele, upon leaving, tweeted affectionately, "I miss you so much, President T." Good for a Central American country and the United States to be in such close alignment. The United States, after all, has had historically a disastrous post-World War II foreign policy vis-a-vis almost all the Latin countries, focused on Cuba, of course. I've always felt that instead of embargoing and trying to isolate Fidel Castro, that if we would have simply embraced him, at least on an economic level, traded Cuban cigars for whatever the hell he needed from us, kept the trade open, the borders open, that the Russians and then the Venezuelans never would have gotten an in. And by airing out the island with a sense of cooperation, I wonder if Castro himself might not have made it. Our isolation helped fuel the identity of that communist island, threw him into the embrace of our enemies, and succeeded in doing nothing except further alienate most of the rest of Latin America. Similar ham-fisted moves in El Salvador, now in Panama. I mean, the list goes on and on in terms of how the United States really created an environment of Yankee go home when instead we should have been more conciliatory, perhaps more non-interventionalist, at least in the biased ostensibly imperialistic and plutocratic ways that we ended up being. But that's a whole separate story. Again, on the plus side, great. El Salvador and the United States have a wonderful relationship. But the foundation of that is the embrace of the Donald with Bukele in a way that's meant to be the PR stunt that it has become. Bukele has managed to bring a heightened level of security and safety to the people of El Salvador by eliminating due process, by ultimately getting rid of a judicial system which was admittedly broken and ineffective. But there are tens of thousands of otherwise innocent people languishing in El Salvador prisons. The price that the people of El Salvador have paid for a strong authoritarian government to clear the streets of gangs, hooligans, and other criminal elements. This story, that of sacrificing personal rights and liberties for the greater good of a safer society, is ancient. Going back to the Greeks, we see it in Rome, see it throughout the Middle Ages, into the age of aristocracy. And the tension has been acute with the evolution of democracies, constitutional governments, where a checks and balance system was created to mitigate the power of the reigning body in terms of literally just arbitrarily rounding people up on a whim and disappearing them or worse. This balancing act between safety, security, and personal liberty is archetypal, and it's unavoidable. There seems to be a zero-sum game between justice as a system where everyone gets their day in court, as it were, and the heavy hand of an all-controlling government to adjudicate in real time, if nothing else, as a way of making the process more efficient. At least that's the excuse. Trump himself was just yesterday, I believe, recorded as saying that the Justice Department takes too long. We don't have time for trials and lawyers and hearings. These people are criminals and they need to be taken off the streets and, if possible, just shipped the hell out of the country so we don't have to worry about them ever again. Just disappear them. And like the bad lieutenant, analogous to Harvey Keitel walking into a convenience store in New York, seeing a crime in place, and beating the shit out of these criminals, being satisfying to us, the audience, as a form of instantaneous and efficient retribution and erstwhile stability, many, many Americans see Trump as performing a similar act of public good. And that's reinforced by the growing skepticism of the public for everything institutional and everything governmental, especially after COVID, where the CDC, Anthony Fauci, institutions designed to ostensibly help keep the public safe, lied to us, where purported experts, all-knowing experts, lied to us, where we were getting continuously mixed messages, oscillating facts, created an environment of skepticism, fueling conspiracy theories, and ultimately destroying any kind of belief in objective truth. And that's reverberated into skepticism around the very foundational principles around which the United States has been created, namely constitutional law. If you have a population who doesn't believe in anything anymore, then they're going to follow their gut. They're going to rejoice at the lieutenant kicking ass in the convenience store because they see results. There's a visceral truth to the immediacy of that kind of emotional release. And that, more than anything, propelled Trump back into office. You could indict him 33 times. You can put him on trial for everything from sex abuse to taking secret documents and stacking them in his bathroom to instigating an insurrection at the Capitol that resulted in the beating of police officers, many of their eventual suicides. And the guy can still get reelected by hanging out in a McDonald's drive-thru and driving a garbage truck. Why? Because he was able to get and sustain and trigger tons of attention for himself by want of his real gift of being the bloviating bullshit artist. But most significantly, riding off this wave of endemic skepticism in our institutions, in our experts. And here's the point I'm trying to get at with this missive, that skepticism has rolled into skepticism about the constitutional foundation of the United States. I had a debate with my friend Ed Powell on another podcast, and he was going off on the power, the constitutional authority of the unitary executive. So if you look at the MAGA intellectual, they might throw back this perception that I'm alleging here that the Constitution should be set on fire. That based on constitutional law, what Trump is doing is part of the official mandate and subject to as much legal discernment and interpretation as any kind of contrarian opinion. But that's not really what I'm talking about here. You could go on and on from a legal point of view to try to describe or even define the power of the unitary executive and its relationship to the other branches of government. And there are many people doing this exactly now. That looming, air quote, constitutional crisis is inevitable and hovering above everything, and how Trump is dodging and delaying and distracting is par for the course. But what I'm getting at here is the public's contempt for not only our institutions and our experts, but the rule of law. If the CDC can lie to us, and if we had to lock down and lose our businesses, and if the government could be that intrusive, apparently for no effective, measurable benefit, then imagine what else this deep state can do. And rather than rely on decades of legal precedent, let's throw it all in the garbage and let's go with our gut. We have lawlessness. Look at our cities. Look at aspects of our culture that are excessive, self-destructive, and against our values, our personal values. I have a family, I have a house, I have kids, they go to school, I want to keep the streets clean. I'm tired of placating the absurd liberals and left who want to empower the people who make me feel insecure. And now we have a leader who is unabashedly rounding them up, putting them on airplanes, and literally shipping them out of the country. Bravo! Finally! The bad lieutenant, he looks a little rough around the edges, and I'm not quite sure he's the stable genius he claims to be. But boy, did he clean up that convenience store. And the whole neighborhood felt so much more at ease after he kicked ass in there. And it wasn't the lawyers and judges and legal system that did it. You had one guy with balls going nuts. And that's the heart of the problem right now, which is not only the skepticism around our government itself, but the embrace of a powerful leader who simply tells it like it is, cuts through the bullshit, and gets it done. And you can counter that by saying, there's going to be a lot of innocent people who are rounded up here. Look at Pam Bondi coming to the defense, head of the DOJ, coming to the immediate and visceral defense of whatever Trump does, and basically dismissing it. Come on, man, you're like, what's the big deal? We're deporting terrorists. They're already illegal. Pam Bondi is a smart person. Donald Trump, although he might lack certain strategic game, as I have observed elsewhere, has a great sense of intuition, and deep down he knows what he's doing too. And they'll be the first to admit that Abrego is perhaps innocent. The government itself has acknowledged that it was a mistake to round him up and ship him off to El Salvador. But here's the other element of this which is not getting enough attention. That is the so what component. One guy is innocent. He's unfairly incarcerated. So what? This goes back to Bukele. Bukele knows he's rounded up tens of thousands of people, innocent people. He knows that in his net for rounding up gang members, there's a lot of other people who got rounded up too. It's the dolphins who get in the net trying to fish tuna in the sea, right? The chicken of the sea. You get some dolphins in there too. But that's just tough shit. Any businessman knows, any leader knows that you're going to have collateral damage and side effects with any kind of benefit you want to bring on society. So an undercurrent of all of this is the acknowledgement, not only on the part of leadership, but on the part of the population itself who supports this. So what? You're going to have side effects to every drug. You're going to have collateral damage. Stop focusing on that. Start focusing on the aggregate cumulative benefit for the message that we're putting out that this kind of convenience store robbery will no longer be put up in the neighborhood. That's what's going on here. Liberals are upset and fuming. The Congress people are flying down to El Salvador, but the look can be construed as hypocritical, as the MAGA minions themselves say. Where were you when the gang was terrorizing my neighborhood? Or where were you when the border was wide open? Why do you care so much about this one guy who admittedly got rounded up by mistake, whom we continue to insist is a terrorist gang member anyway? Why are you exerting so much effort when you didn't seem to do shit for years when you were in power to keep our country safer and more secure? Fuck you. We're over it. And stop already with this due process crap. Due process got us into the mess we're in right now. Endless lawyers and trial dates, mountains of bureaucracy that that everyone has taken advantage of. Everyone from anchor babies to immigrants lying about the circumstances of their marriage to an American citizen, sneaking across the border and alleging the need for asylum. It's all bullshit. We've been used and abused and taken advantage of, and it's not going to continue. We're going to stop this. And sure, there are going to be a lot of people who need asylum. Their lives are in jeopardy. And sure, we're going to make administrative mistakes. It's just like Musk and his Doge. Yeah, we fired some critical nuclear scientists because we're taking the chainsaw to the whole spreadsheet. But you know what? Even that is tough shit. You can't bring about change unless you do it in a seismic, cataclysmic, revolutionary way, because here's the thing: the binary alternative to smashing the entire China shop, throwing the entire deck of cards in the air. The alternative to that is taking a piecemeal, slow, molasses turtle, slow, procedural approach. That's what got us into this bureaucratic mess in the first place. So, you know what? We're going to set the whole thing on fire, and there's going to be, I can't say it enough, there's going to be collateral damage, you morons. That's the price that we all have to pay. That's the price that the people of El Salvador have paid. But it's a price worth paying, because compare El Salvador now to the way it was before. Life is imperfect. You can't have an ideal situation. And if we're given a binary choice between safety and security and our personal rights taken away, we're going to take safety and security. Don't you get it? That's clear in the air quote mandate. This guy had 33 indictments and tried to cause an insurrection. That's not cause for him to be impeached for a third time or barred from the office. That's the primary rationale for re-electing his ass. He's a rogue, he's a renegade, he's a vigilante, just like Harvey in the movie. The neighborhood can't be cleaned up without a guy like that. Now, I'm not advocating any of this. The reason I'm ranting right now is to advocate the exact opposite. That this is the gateway to tyranny. And the Hitler analogy has been used over and over again, but it's just a very good one. Larry David just wrote a very, very funny it's not an op-ed, it's more like a satirical piece about being invited to the White House to meet Donald Trump, knowing what a monster he is, and then finding out what a gracious guy he is. No, it's not Donald Trump, it's Hitler. He's invited to go see Hitler in 1939. So by analogy, Larry David was poking fun at, of course, Bill Maher. Bill Maher, who got invited to the White House by Kid Rock, mutual friend of him and the Donald. And then Bill Maher goes on his show 2 weeks later and spends 12 minutes telling the libtards what a great guy Donald is. So Larry David did the Hitler. It's just effective. So I'm not going to dwell on this Hitler analogy, but it is the classic tool used not only by Hitler, but every autocrat and dictator. When Bismarck agreed to give the chancellery to Hitler, the condition was that he get rid of the military uniform, the brown shirt, and dress in a suit and tie. So most people don't equate Hitler with dressing, combing his hair and tweaking his little funny mustache and getting in a suit and tie. But look it up. Hitler was in a suit and tie to assuage Bismarck, to enable him to become chancellor. And then, oh, by the way, Hitler was democratically voted in as well. That's another little tidbit people tend to forget. Adolf Hitler was democratically voted in by the people of Germany. Now, am I equating Donald Trump with Hitler? Yes and no. There's always this whiplash. Is he as bad as Hitler? Obviously not. But the point I'm making is it's the exact same tools. It's feeding off of the skepticism and anger of the public, and it's ceding control to the unitary executive, to the chancellor, the Kaiser, to the fearless leader to bring safety, security, and order to our border, to crime, to foreign policy. All these countries are eating our lunch and taking advantage of us. To trade policy. The list goes on and on. It's a singular approach that has many facets to it. And I've ranted before as the air quote Trump apologist, where I get tired of people thinking that Trump is just a maniac and he just makes it up as he goes along. He makes up a lot of his actions as he goes along. For example, the tariff policy that keeps oscillating. But he does have a long game, and he does have an overarching ideological and strategic point of view, which is exactly this, which is I'm going to be the bad lieutenant. That's why this whole conversation is relevant and vitally important. Trump likens himself to the bad lieutenant, and his MAGA minions and everyone who supports him for doing that is akin to the audience getting satisfaction when Harvey Keitel kicks the ass of these criminals in the convenience store. Harvey Keitel's The Detective is a mess. Trump looks like a mess, but that's part of the persona of the person these folks think can bring about that security and safety. So, in summary, what I'm seeing here is a historical analog where a very frustrated populace fed misinformation, contradictory information, embraces a funny looking, autocratically behaving asshole to hate the people we hate and to affect change that we feel is long overdue. And the Democrats have a challenge here, which is they continue to use reason and rationality. They continue to cite the Constitution. They continue to use institutions and expertise and history as a crutch. When the people who support Trump, who support autocrats, have, as I've mentioned, dismiss the importance, relevance, and insist on the disempowerment thereof of institutions, expertise, and the Constitution itself. Fuck that shit. It got us into the mess we're in now, and we need that bad lieutenant to kick ass. And we know that innocent people are going to suffer. We know that the economy is going to take a hit, that Wall Street is going to take a hit. We know that our businesses might not have undocumented people that we need for the businesses to run. We know that our overall population fertility rate here, 1.6 kids per female, is insufficient to even keep our American population on par. And we know that immigration is vital to just keep our population stable, if not growing. But fuck it. Doesn't matter. We might even sense that global trade and a non-tariffed reality heightens overall market enthusiasm and volume. Better to sell 100 hot dogs at 5 cents profit than 5 hot dogs at $5 profit, right? But we don't care. We need the bad lieutenant to wreak havoc, to fuck shit up. And we're willing to give the bad lieutenant the keys to the kingdom. We're willing to give up our personal freedoms to enable this guy to do what we feel he needs to do. And here's the final point I'm making. It's us versus them. I don't think that the bad lieutenant is going to kick my ass. The bad lieutenant is going to kick the ass of these criminals. And if you happen to get in the way, that's tough luck. But it's like that Oingo Boingo song. Nothing bad ever happens to me. I'm immune. And I'm immune through the pure emotional allegiance to this fearless leader. And I'll cap this by saying that the Democrats have to wake up. They have to wake up to the reality that this sentiment has become endemic, maybe not a majority, but close to one across the United States. And until they can emotionally connect with a level of visceral energy that the lieutenant did, kicking ass in that convenience store, it's going to be a losing proposition. And through that losing proposition of the only opposing party that's able to oppose this menace, it's only going to get worse as our personal rights and liberties start to vaporize, as our economy starts to grind into the dirt, and as America, once great, turns into this twisted vision of an America that's great only for the select few, which is the textbook definition of a dictatorship run by an oligarchy. So let's hope the Democrats wake up a little bit, and let's hope that the turn of the tide isn't an extreme, polarized mirror reflection of this kind of idiocy and overreach. Because lastly, that could be the most tragic result of this entire clusterfuck. If you've got King Donald, imagine a Queen AOC who takes the progressive vision to an equally alarmist extreme through the same mechanisms that the MAGA GOP have used to empower that mythical and all-reaching unitary executive in the Oval Office. Thanks for listening to my bald and bloviating podcast. Comment. I'm eager to hear what you think. Like, share, and more bloviation to come, as we do exist within very interesting times.